Well, hello everybody, it's Greg coming here and it's great to be with you. I'm from Good News for Israel, and we're taking 5 and Selah and just taking some time just to think about the Lord and letting Him fill our hearts and His Word to fill our hearts and mind. Today we're on number 14 of this series, and it's Abram arriving in Shechem. And so Genesis chapter 12 verse 6 tells us that Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh, and the Canaanites were then in the land. So we looked last time at him starting to take his journey from Haran, where his family was, down into this new land of Canaan. But he came to a specific place, and the place is called Shechem. What do you know about Shechem? How important was it that the Lord brought Abram to this very first place on his journey into the land of Canaan? We're going to find out that it's actually a very important place, and it's so exciting. Shechem actually means a saddle or even a neck or on the shoulders, and it literally is nestled in a valley between two mountains in Samaria, and looks like a saddle or the neck in between two shoulders. And these two mountains where it sits between are very important mountains as well, and well known in the scriptures. You may or may not know of them, but one mountain is called Mount Gerizim to the south, and one is called Mount Ebal to the north. Today the city of Shechem is called Nablus. So let's look at a few reasons why Shechem is important to the covenant between God and Abram. Well, first of all, it was the first place where Abram saw God. I personally think that he met with a theophany or a pre-appearance of the Messiah Jesus at this place, as happens in other places throughout the scripture. Secondly, it was there that the Lord made a proclamation to Abram, and he said, "To your descendants I will give this land." And lastly, he built an altar there, and it was the first of several altars that he built in the land of Canaan, and we will touch on those as we go. And then we'll see that Shechem became a very significant place in the minds and the hearts of the descendants of Abram and the leaders of the nation of Israel. But let's start with Jacob, Abram's grandson, who was renamed Israel by God, and his unusual link with this special place called Shechem. 175 years after Abram arrived in Shechem, it would become the home of Jacob, who was Israel, and his family after Jacob left his uncle Laban after 20 years of service. So Jacob was around about 97 years old and was with his family, with Leah and Rachel, their maidservants, and lots of children, and the whole household, and great herds of sheep and goats when he arrived in Shechem, knowing full well that this was the place where his grandfather had built an altar to God and received that proclamation that his descendants would receive this land. So we pick up that story in Genesis chapter 33 and verse 18 to 20, and it says, "Then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city, and he bought the parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Elohe, Israel." So Jacob, Israel, refers to God as the God of Israel here at Shechem. It seems surprising at first to have Jacob come and dwell here and buy the land that Abram had built his altar on and dig the famous well which is there now, known as Jacob's well. But he bought with his purchase, with buying it, he brought an alignment of himself, Jacob or Israel, to the covenant that was specifically aimed at Abram's physical descendants, i.e. himself, Israel, and his family. So perhaps out of honour and an attempt to stay true to the covenant, Jacob and his family lived there on the very spot where God made the covenant with Abram well over 150 years earlier. And eventually, while they were there, the crown prince of Shechem took a liking to Jacob's daughter, whose name was Dinah, and wanted to marry her. And Jacob's ever-scheming sons arranged to feign an agreement to this marriage if the male inhabitants of Shechem would consent to all be circumcised, which they all did, and they agreed on mass, and so the men of Shechem were circumcised. But of course, after the circumcision came a fever, and when it was at its greatest, the scheming sons of Jacob arose and killed all the men of Shechem who were too sick to resist the battle. So Jacob was forced to flee to Bethel, but not before he necessarily dealt with the idols that his family had accumulated over the previous 20 years. So in Genesis 35 it says in verse 2 to 4, Jacob said to his household and all who were with him, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your garments, and let us arise and go up to Bethel, that I may make an altar there to the God who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me wherever I have gone." So all the family gave Jacob the foreign gods that they had and the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak tree which was near Shechem. So where are all those idols buried? In Shechem. And so quickly we're seeing Shechem being a place that's all about God's covenant and our decision to follow him or not. Have you had an opportunity to bury your idols since you believed on Jesus? What are they? They're the things that you put before the Lord. Even the patriarch Jacob had them in the midst and in his family, but at Shechem they had to go. Are you ready to let go of the idols that may prevent you inheriting the fullness of God's covenant? We're going to pick this up next time, as this city is such a great city in the Bible, and we're going to learn a lot more about it. Take time and consider that. Are you walking with God, or you have any idols in your heart? Time to lay them down. Until next time, God bless you. Bye for now.